Welcome to Robotics and Automation News webinars, where you can be part of a global event without leaving your home or office. Attend our live webinars and communicate directly with influential professionals in your industry.
Hello, my name is Abdul Montakim. I'm editor of Robotics and Automation News.com. In this interview, Håkan Agnevall, president of Volvo Bus Corporation, talks to us about the recent launch of the company's first autonomous bus in Singapore. The bus is fully electric and is launched in partnership with Singapore's Land Transport Authority and the Nanyang Technological University. Agnevall talks about the recent launch of the autonomous e-bus, as well as the broader Volvo initiatives in the area of autonomous vehicle technology.
We just started the demonstration of our fully electric autonomous bus that we have developed together with LTA, Land Transport Authority of Singapore, and NTU, the big technical university in Singapore. It's actually, as we understand, it's a world's first. It's the world's first fully electric autonomous bus that can actually operate the route without human intervention. So it's a milestone for the industry. And we use this as a test platform for testing out future autonomous operations. We are still testing in confined areas, and we are testing, driving a route, and we are also testing operating a bus autonomously in a depot.
Right, and why did you choose Singapore? I do understand it's an advanced technological industrial society, even though it's a very small place. Tell us why you chose that, and is there a chance that you spread from there within Asia? The reason I ask that is because maybe the regulations there are different and more amenable to new technology like this.
So the reason why we basically have our first pilot installation in Singapore outside of Gothenburg, our hometown in Sweden, I would say that the reason is that Singapore is actually a beacon for public transport. I would say certainly in the region, but also in the world. I think Singapore is very well formulated of the role of its public transport and investing a lot. Further, Singapore has a very clear agenda for how to become a world leader on autonomous vehicles. And I don't always say thirdly, as Volvo Buses, we have more than a 40-year relationship with Singapore as a supplier and a partner. So all those things coming together really makes a lot of sense for us to do this pilot in Singapore.
And about the bus itself, it's quite obviously it's very interesting technology not to have a driver. What are the advantages? I mean, I imagine obviously if you don't have a driver, you don't have that cost. That's one thing. But would you still have a conductor? What in the UK you call a conductor, somebody who's on the bus to, look after the passengers and things like that. Well, how do you imagine it operating when it's in full operation? And even during the test, there must be someone there who is, part of the bus company, as it were.
Yeah, first of all, I think we recognize that the autonomous journey is a complex one. And our view, it's going to be a staggered development. And we are still at an early stage where we are driving in confined test areas. In this staggered development, I think a lot of the autonomous solutions will initially be focused on driver support. So whereas this vehicle can drive by itself, if you were to make a commercial operation years from now, you still have a bus captain or a bus host on the vehicle to be able to take over if needed. It's a journey, and the journey starts in confined areas. It starts with depot applications. It could continue into applications with dedicated bus lanes, etc. But it's going to take a while.
And what do you think the main accelerating factor will be in terms of the spreading of this technology? Is it government regulations? I believe most people in your situation will tell me that the technology is, more or less there. It's capable of autonomous transport, and the vehicles are reasonably good. There may be some mapping and other issues, to develop. But what are the steps towards full deployment on the roads in public? I mean, in confined areas, I suppose the people, the organization that owns the grounds would be the one who decides what to do, and there's fewer regulations. But what about taking it onto the public roads? What do you need in order to be able to do that? Does the technology need to improve and develop, or is it more regulations?
I would say to take the vehicle or the bus on public roads in a full commercial operation, the technology still need to develop, both from a vehicle driving perspective, from a safety perspective, etc. And as I said, it's going to be a staggered development. Then, of course, it's not only about technology development, it's also about regulatory development. What is allowed and where autonomous driving should be allowed, and it's about city planning, it's about planning of public transport, but also areas like insurance, etc., etc. So it's rather complex environment.
And what do you think your own estimation of how long it will take before these issues are largely solved or agreed upon?
I would say from a technical perspective, the technical development will be staggered, and it's going to take several years. On the regulatory side, I think it will go with different speed in different countries. Here, Singapore is clearly in the forefront, but even still, it would take several years.
Right. At the moment, it's all quite exciting and new technology and in a way fun, I suppose. Certainly from the point of view of reporting about it. But this is serious technology. This is seriously going to happen. It's not. I mean, the reason I say that is because there are some people who are kind of against this type of technology in some countries. They don't really like the idea of driverless vehicles of any kind because they just perhaps don't feel safe around them or things like that. And as you say, there are some countries that probably more in favor of it. But on a global sort of map, which areas would you say would adopt it first and which areas later?
I think it's hard to get to give a general answer. I would say that where there is significant need for mass transport in urban environment with a lot of passenger flow, I think this is where you would see the biggest benefits, and all. That's why I think the interest will be quicker than in other places.
You don't know any. You can't name a country which will be at the forefront, apart from possibly Singapore. Germans apparently, according to a survey, Germans aren't too keen on driverless transport necessarily. But it's a matter of time, I think, before this kind of technology is seen on the roads. A matter of time, whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 15 or 20. It's kind of inevitable, wouldn't you say?
I would say that the technology change will come. I agree on that, but it will be, as I said, a staggered approach, and also the journey to full autonomous level 4 or level 5. I think is quite some time, and also, I mean, I often get the question: is there a future for drivers? I mean, is that a future profession? And I would say it's going to be a future for profession for many years. It's hard to say who will be the leaders. I think Singapore will actually be one of the leaders because there are so many trials going on in different parts of the world. There is a lot of interest, I would say, globally, and where it will go the fastest, it's hard to predict.
Yeah, Volvo is doing a lot of interesting things in autonomous vehicles. Buses, obviously, we're talking about, you're the CEO of Volvo Buses, but I've read stories about Volvo developing autonomous mining vehicles, obviously cars, and I can't remember whether it's developing trucks, but that's another area as well. And obviously, one of the driving factors is that literally there are fewer human drivers wanting to take up those jobs, like lorry drivers and things like that. Can you give us maybe a brief summary of Volvo's initiatives in the different areas? I know your area is buses, but you obviously would know better than me what Volvo is doing in terms of other autonomous transport research and development projects and testing, and possibly even commercialization of those.
Yeah, so Volvo Group is a big group for delivering trucks, delivering buses, construction equipment, and industrial engines. And we, in the development in the autonomous arena, we use a kind of group approach to autonomous systems, and we try to use these systems in different vehicle applications. So you're fully correct. I mean, Volvo has already launched autonomous trials in open mining, in underground mining, in harvesting applications, also with construction equipment in quarries, etc. So there is a number of applications covering both trucks and now buses. And in this journey, I think our approach is safety first. I mean, we will never compromise on safety, and this is yet another reason why we strongly believe in the staggered approach.
In the buses sector, I mean, at the moment, there probably are no autonomous buses in operation. Certainly in this country and probably other countries as well, there's driverless trains. In the what they call in this country light railway. It's sort of a much smaller version of the underground trains, usually found in the Docklands, in the financial district of the Docklands. So they don't have drivers, but it's easier, or makes sense because it's on one track. There's no complicated maneuvers to navigate for the train. But in the buses area, what kind of you talked about a bus lane, for example. Is that something that's actually feasible? On an open road, it's very difficult to imagine a bus lane. I mean, in this country, we have bus lanes, but they kind of are used by other vehicles as well, and it depends on the time of day when the buses are. Certain times of the day the buses are on there, and other times all other vehicles can be on there. Is that something that is a dedicated lanes an answer for buses, autonomous buses?
So if you look on autonomous bus applications today, there are actually autonomous buses, not Volvo ones, smaller ones. I mean, taking 10 passengers, driving in 10 to 20 kilometers, that are operating today already. the Volvo approach is full-scale buses, full electric buses. So it's a different dimension of the approach, I would say. Dedicated lanes, it exists in what we call bus rapid transit applications. And in those applications, you really have real dedicated lanes, i.e. they are set up so that other traffic cannot enter. And I think that is that's an important precondition when you want to apply autonomous vehicles, because you really want to make sure that you don't have any, I would say, human intervention. I mean, either vehicles entering the lane or either pedestrians running out in the lane, so to say.
Okay, can you give us an overview of Volvo Buses as a business, the kind of annual revenue or turnover or any data that you can give, and then provide your own possibly projections about the autonomous aspect of it, in what sense, what is the business model and how much revenue as a proportion do you project it to generate or earn over the next however many years?
So Volvo Buses, it's a global company. We have 9,000 employees, annual turnover around $3.5 billion US. Very much active in North America, South America, in Europe, and in Asia. We see buses as a very competitive mode of public transport, and the growth in the market is really fueled by the increased urbanization. I mean, already today, more than half of the world's population are living in cities, and in 2060, 2/3 are projected to live in cities. And when we want to create the future cities, we really need to address the topics of congestion, emission, and noise. And this is where public transport has a key role to play. And buses is a very attractive mode of transport.
But do you think are there any projections or financial projections about what autonomous buses can do for your business in terms of what proportion? There's definitely a business there.
No, there are no such financial projections, because this is still technology at the very early stage.
Right. Okay. All right. There are no financial projections, but what about your guesswork? I mean, my guesswork is that the local authorities in these cities, transport is one of their top priorities in terms of provisions for residents. In this country, buses are very important. London is, a very busy city. Buses are very important, and it's a very costly thing to provide. Transport systems are generally very costly. What are the savings, even if you don't know what they are, or haven't got projections of the business? From a Volvo revenue point of view, can you say in general terms, is it possible to save money? Can a local authority save money by having autonomous buses, or is it going to be the same thing? Whereas now you have drivers driving the buses, you might have the bus captains, as you call them, so the cost won't be any different. I mean, is there a financial argument in favor of autonomous buses, or a difference?
So if you look on the immediate impact, or the kind of impact short term, I think there is immediate opportunities to improve safety, and in terms of less traffic accidents, which are very costly. There are also, if you go into confined areas and depot operation, some really good opportunities for saving, both making it less labor intense. But in many countries, 30 to 40% of the damages of a city bus actually occurs in the depot. And if you could remove those with autonomous systems, there is a significant cost saving there. I mean, as long as the driver is on the bus, and our view is that there's going to be a bus driver on bus host for many years. I mean, you will still have that cost element. However, the operation of the bus could be done in a smoother way, reducing fuel consumption, and also making it more accurate in its operation, which also brings a great benefit for the operators, because they normally have incentive programs for operating the buses on time.
That's very interesting. Thanks for the insight. The point that I'd like to ask you to elaborate is you said the depot is where 30 to 40% of the accidents, damage or whatever happen. Is it possible to have hybrid semi-autonomous buses, so that in the depot, the human drivers don't have to move them around as much as they would now? Is it possible? Does that technology currently exist? I mean, it seems theoretically possible to be able to provide buses that are semi-autonomous. So on the roads, on the public roads, the human bus drivers can drive them, and in the depots and where possible, the autonomous functions can take over. Is that something that sounds reasonable?
Yes, and that is actually that exact application we will be testing in Singapore here, when we will test autonomous driving in the depots. But it's still on a test stage, but this is exactly what we want to address in those tests.
That's very interesting, because then you don't have to worry about the regulations, probably, because inside the depots is the bus companies, it's freer to use autonomous machines. Is that correct?
That is correct, because it's a more regulated, in terms of confined area. So you're correct on that.
Okay, and about the technology itself, the autonomous aspect of the technology, it's quite interesting that Volvo is quite enthusiastic about this thing. Is it? Can you tell me about the operation from an insider's point of view, in terms of the kind of people and departments, how many people are involved in this project of autonomy and new types of mobility services, as they call them, as some companies call them, in terms of as a proportion of your overall staff in the world? And how does it work? I mean, how have you organized this aspect of your business?
The autonomous venture within Volvo Group is a group initiative where you clearly want to have a group platform, and there we leverage what we call our CAST system, the Common Architecture Shared Technology, which is basically you develop a technology that you then apply in different type of applications and different type of vehicles. So in terms of developing a shared platform, it's done in the group, and there are several hundreds of engineers working on that right now.
Right. And do you feel like you're in competition with, you said generally there is a lot of companies, a competitive space, the buses area is competitive space, but do you feel like there's a competition in the autonomous side of it as well? Or are all companies sort of thinking of it as a very long range projections, and too far in the distance to worry too much about? Is there something? Is there a race on, or is it just something that companies like yours are just keeping tabs on and keeping in contact with, if you like?
No, I think we see a very rapid development. When we look at the competitive space, I think we have the big OEM companies, and as far as I know, most of these are engaged in developing autonomous platforms. Then, of course, there are the new players, the startups that try, somewhat smaller buses. They might be coming in from the software industry, teaming up with a smaller OEM, and so there is a very dynamic environment, both with established players and all newcomers to the industry.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I probably have one or two other questions. I particularly find it interesting that you're in Sweden, which is a very large country in terms of landmass. So it seems a really ideal country to have autonomous transport because it's quite a demanding thing to do to drive from one end of the country to the other. I don't know how much of it is habitable, but what about you? Just to ask you actually on Sweden, do you think are there any autonomous bus services in Sweden? And does Volvo expect to be, is Volvo part of it, or does it expect to be part of it?
We have full electric bus operations in Sweden. On the autonomous side, we are also still at the piloting stage. So there are no commercial lines yet running on autonomous vehicles.
Right. And if there's anything, I think that's all the questions I have. If there's anything that I haven't asked that you want to say, please do so. That would be helpful to me because I don't always think of the right questions. Is there something you want to add?
No, I think the general message is that autonomous is a very exciting technology. I would say there are three technology trends currently that is really changing the way of public transport, and that is electromobility, autonomous, and connectivity. In the autonomous journey, we clearly acknowledge it's a complex journey with a staggered approach, and safety is first.
Right. And how long have you been with Volvo yourself?
I've been with Volvo for 6 years now.
Okay. And where
as the president of Volvo Buses.
All right. Okay. And what's your background? Where were you before?
I worked for several years in robotics. I worked in several years for ABB in power systems and robotics.
Great background to have, ABB. That's a Swiss company. Is it more Swedish than Swiss? Never understood that myself.
I would say it's a very global company. I wouldn't even say it's a Swedish-Swiss. It's a clearly multinational companies these days. These days headquartered in Switzerland, but with a very global footprint.
Okay, and just one last thing I thought about in terms of Volvo as a company in general. I can't remember how it's positioned in terms of as a automaker in terms of the top 5 or top 10 or whatever. Can you tell me about that? In Volvo, is it top 10, and what are the ambitions for it, and so on? Because there was a time many years ago, I remember 20, 30 years ago, I can't remember, but there was a time that it was struggling, and it got, I think, sold to Chinese investors or something eventually. I can't remember what happened in between, but there was a time that it was struggling many, many years ago. What's the current situation now with Volvo?
So Volvo today is two companies really. Volvo Cars, which is owned by Chinese owners and is doing very well right now. Then there is Volvo Group, and in the Volvo Group we are focusing on the commercial vehicles, trucks, buses, construction equipment, and on the truck side we are the second largest truck provider in the world.
Fantastic, thank you for that insight. Did you say it has autonomous trucks or testing some?
We are testing autonomous trucks, yes, in different types of applications, mining applications, quarries, harvesting applications.
Yeah. I thought so. I'm sure I've seen pictures of it. All right, Håkan. Well,
Good.
that was a great interview, and I really appreciate it.
Send us an email at sales@roboticsandautomationnews.com to register for one of our many upcoming webinars. And if you'd like us to host your webinar, we have a range of options, including long-term lead generation packages and marketing campaigns. We look forward to hearing from you soon.